Hello and welcome to The View from 4 Feet and 3 Inches. I'm your host, Cassidy Huff. I am a white woman, and today I have a blank white background, white wall behind me. I am wearing my hair down. It is a little bit below shoulder length now. I'm wearing black glasses and a pink sweater today. And today I have one of my dear friends. I'm so excited to have her on the show. Alyssa, how are you, Alyssa?
Hi, Cassidy. I'm doing great. I almost just said my real name right there. um, yes, I'm Alyssa, and I am sitting in front of a gray couch because this is where the light comes into my apartment. We got one
Yep.
spot and one spot only.
Yep.
A white blanket is behind me, and I'm wearing a purple sweater with some pink detailing, and my hair
I
is
love
very
it.
curly and pulled back.
Yay! Okay, well, I'm so excited to have you on. Thank you so much for reaching out to me and saying that you wanted to be on the show.
Yeah,
Uh,
of course. I was like, anytime I get to gab, I'm ready.
and that's all you and I do at events.
I
We
know.
just we just gab about things. We're like, oh my god, did you hear about that drama?
We love to spill the tea.
We do. We love to spill the tea in quiet little whispers in a corner so we don't have to talk to anybody else. Could you share a little bit about who you are, what you do, for those of people who might not know?
Yeah, of course. So, I am a hard of hearing creative. I literally do anything creative, any way I can make a money being creative. My biggest passions are definitely directing and acting. Um, and I also am an illustrator. So I do have an Etsy shop called Bionic Outlaw, just because a few years ago when TikTok was kind of becoming a thing, I was like, I don't see any like fun, colorful, tongue-in-cheek
Mm,
disabled merch. So I was like, you know what? I don't know how to draw, but I'm just gonna make it. I'm just gonna like write my experience on
I love
different
that.
stickers and T-shirts. So yeah, I mean, I really anytime anybody wants to collaborate or just like break out in color,
Let's do it. So you
yeah.
and I actually met at a deaf event uh,
Mhm.
years ago. I don't even know how many years ago. Years ago.
Yeah, probably 2022 maybe.
Yeah,
I
something like
think.
that. Because I moved here in 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that would make sense. Like 2022 probably. And that's
Mhm.
where I first like you had a little booth with your merch out and I loved it. And our mutual friend Chrissy actually introduced
Mhm.
us. And so that's how we met. And then since then, I think I've seen you at pretty much every single event I've ever gone to with the disability
Yeah.
community.
Yeah, we
Um,
roll deep.
yeah, every time I walk in, I'm like, oh, there's Alyssa. We're good.
Someone to talk to.
At least I know one person here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so it's really cool. We get to see each other pretty often, at least once every few months, usually.
Yeah, and I mean, you have astronomically grown. Like I think when I first met you, we started following each other on social media, and I remember you talking about, oh, I kind of wanted to get rid of it, but at the same time, I've worked so hard to build my following. I don't know what it was, but it was probably like under 10K, right?
Yeah,
And then I remember, next time checking in with you, I was like, oh my gosh, look at her go. You were just
I
like
try.
killing it. And I was like, yes, this is somebody that like so needs to be propped up as a representative in our community.
Thank
Because,
you.
you're just so well spoken and
Thank you. That's so
so
nice.
funny. You're so funny.
Thank you.
And so it's been really like fun. I always love seeing people in the community like just expand and grow and
Yeah, me too.
do their thing. Yeah. So you've
I'm
done a
really
lot since we
curious.
first met.
Oh, thank you. You have two. I see you in like on my For You page in ads now.
Yeah.
That is so strange. I'll be like, oh, it's an ad. Scroll. Wait a second. Scroll back up. Who was that? I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
My
wait, I
grandpa
know
says the
her.
same thing.
I'm like, oh yes, I love her. I know her.
It's so
It's
funny.
like knowing a celebrity for the first time. You're like, oh my god. Do those ads that you do ever come up on your For You page?
Never. But my
Really?
mother will call me. Yeah, never, ever. And my mother will call me and be like, oh, our neighbor saw you in this ad. And I'm like, I don't know if I should be embarrassed or not. Like, I'm not. But at the same
Right.
time, it does feel like you don't know who's seeing it, you
Right.
know? So,
Right.
like, even my grandpa saw one. And I think my grandpa only has Facebook. So I'm like, Grandpa, I mean, I guess he's like a target audience
Thanks.
for like stereotypical hard of hearing people.
Mm.
But I'm like, that's kind of weird.
Okay, so
You
I'm
know, I just
so
want my grandpa to be
curious.
my, like, go ahead.
No, no, it's okay. I'm
No, you
so
go first.
curious to see like how your experience as a hard of hearing person is either mainly on social media because I didn't really release the fact that I was hard of hearing until way later on, like pretty recently, because I wasn't like hiding it, but I wasn't fully set in that identity, if that makes sense, until
Yeah,
recently
for
when I
sure.
started going to more deaf events and like started actually learning ASL, and now I'm in ASL classes and things like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I am a part of this community now, I guess. But I'm curious like what your experience has been within that community and then also within the social media hard of hearing deaf community.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't, I mean, really and truly, I didn't grow up deaf. I mean, I
Yeah, me
grew up
neither.
with hearing loss. Like, I think I got my first hearing aids when I was 5.
So
So
did
I grew up,
I.
oh, cool, fun, twins. Um, I grew up deaf, but I didn't have a deaf cultural experience.
Mm,
I only knew
me
one
too,
other
yeah.
person in my school. I mean, I'm from a small town in Alabama, so it's not like as populated as it here is in Los Angeles or on the internet where there's deaf people everywhere.
Right.
And also, I was the only deaf person in my family, so it's not
Mhm.
like anybody had any resources. But, in 2020, I was like, okay, I am going to start posting on social media just to heal the parts of myself that feel like I can't explain myself to my friends or my family, and kind of just like maybe it'll connect to somebody on the internet. And so I started meeting my first like hard of hearing friends there, and that was like one of the best little mini phases of my life because I was like, oh my gosh, we get each other.
Yeah.
Like they understand that you can't talk to us if we're not looking at you. We have to caption everything. Like it's not an option.
Yeah.
And I just felt so seen and validated, I guess, in a way. And but then I will say, like 2020, 2021, my first 2 years in the deaf community was like pretty good, but I hadn't really joined the deaf culture per se in terms of like ASL.
Mm.
And I did have like a very rocky experience with the deaf community. I feel like everybody has had that experience in any minority community where here's the thing is I just want to have fun and love people, and I'm so here for hard conversations. I love, I'm naturally curious, so I want to know everybody's point of view. But I did realize pretty quickly that there are people that are always going to be elitist in a way, negative, kind of gatekeep.
Mm.
And at first I took that personally. I was like, oh, if I don't look like this, if I don't behave as what is quote unquote typical deaf culture, I am not deaf enough.
Mm.
If I don't simcom, like sign and talk, I'm not deaf enough. If I don't post videos only in ASL, I'm not deaf enough. And that like really took a toll on my mental health, especially when I met you in 2022. I was like going through it. I was like, and I was at a deaf event where it was only deaf vendors, and it was my
You were
first
the
time being
only
like,
other hard of hearing person that I encountered at that event. And I was like, oh my God, you're not signing for me?
oh,
Great. I'm so overwhelmed. I was like, I
yeah.
don't know
Well,
what people
and
are saying.
yeah, and I mean, I've been to deaf events now where I'm like, okay, realistically, like, because everyone in my life, people I work with, people I love on, people I hang out with, they are oral. And so I do go through phases where I'll sign a lot for a 4 hour event and then I'm just like absolutely depleted. It's the same thing as listening fatigue, but like the opposite. Um,
Where your hands are like, oh, ow. I'm
in
done.
my
I'm done for
brain,
the day.
it takes so long because like it's kind of like
Well,
going from English
it's
to
another
Spanish.
language. It's literally like switching your brain on and off, and that's not our like
First language.
language that we no, that's not our language we grew up with. So we're like,
Yeah.
hang on. Like translating in your head, and
Yeah.
then you're trying not to like speak the words. You're trying to it's a whole thing.
Yeah. And also, I feel like I understand ASL so much easier watching it.
Yeah, so do I.
When I come to speak, I'm like, wait, hold on, give me a minute. I'm like, my thoughts are disappearing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I genuinely, but now I've kind of come to the other side of that. I've healed that part of me that's like, you know what? No, maybe my purpose is to help bridge the gap between hard of
Mm,
hearing people and deaf people. And maybe it's also just to be fine being hard of hearing. Like, that's
mm,
enough. Because what I have learned in my 20s is that I was always comparing like my grief to other people's grief, my trauma to other people's trauma, my
mm,
hearing loss to other people's hearing, and I'd always play like, oh, I don't have it as bad, I don't need as much help, like I'm not accepting as much access because I don't need it as much. But
uh-huh.
really, the whole point of access is that it shouldn't really matter. You
Right.
know, like it should meet everybody where they're at. And
Right.
so I think in 2023, I was like, okay, I'm good with who I am.
Yeah.
Obviously, we always want to grow and expand. And if, I have children, who knows? Maybe I will obviously bring deaf culture into the household.
Right.
But I don't feel the need to alter who I am to accommodate expectations that are kind of made up, you
Mm.
know?
I love that.
So, yeah. So, I mean, and I do think in 2023, I really expanded my friends to just disabilities across the board outside of just hard of hearing. And that is my sweet spot, because there's more diversity there.
Mm.
There's more empathy and understanding, and people are more curious because we all have different types of disabilities.
Yeah.
So,
100%. Yeah, I think you brought up something really that really resonates with me, which is one growing up in mainstream, right? So I also got my hearing aids, my one hearing aid when I was really, really young. I think I was probably around 4 or 5. And my mom, who was a really young mom at the time, I was her firstborn, and she didn't know to ask for any resources, right? And nobody, the audiologists that were treating me were doing just that. They were treating what the problem was. And so they didn't give her any resources like, hey, maybe you should put her in a deaf support group. I was pretty young for that, but like maybe you should take her to some deaf events. Maybe you should put her into ASL learning classes because I was really, really struggling when I was younger. People thought I just wasn't listening and that I
exactly.
wasn't, that I was just really imaginative. That I was just really imaginative. And they didn't understand they just thought I was in my own world all the time. And so
That's the story of my life.
yeah, they never thought that. And I was super creative, like I still am, but they just never really thought that, like, oh, maybe there's a hearing component here. Like, she's not just not listening, she just literally cannot hear. And so they were like, oh, she's really stubborn, she's really bossy, she doesn't follow directions. And then they were like, oh, she just didn't hear the directions. She just doesn't know what the directions are, actually. So, but even when they figured out that there was a hearing component that I was missing, they didn't give my the people in my life, the adults in my life, any kind of resources to help me in the hearing world as well as in the deaf and hard of hearing world. Their solution was to just put a hearing aid in my ear and give my teachers a mic that they could wear around their necks and that could connect to my hearing aid, and that was it.
Yeah,
That was the
exactly.
whole thing. And
Yeah, I
so
mean,
no, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that I mean, that's the whole problem. Is I grew up in the 90s, and only people that were like doctors or audiologists really had information. So if you
Yeah.
didn't have a social circle that was dealing, that you had a child that was disabled or deaf or hard of hearing, there was no like resources.
Right.
So that's why I think I started sharing my journey online, because a lot of podcasts or creators were like doctors. Everything was like such a medical, clinical observation of studying people.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, why don't we just actually hear from people that have lived experience and
Right.
that can tell you, and like there's backlash to that because people will be like, oh, well, my experience isn't your experience. It's like, okay, great, Karen, then post about your experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so I think I'm so grateful that we were able to find each other kind of through internet mutual friends, just because it really does like help expand your world. Like I remember one time I was leaving my restaurant job. It was like 10:30 at night, and I was walking to my car, and I saw like 15 deaf people. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go say hello. So I went over there and I kind of waved, and I could tell they wanted me to take a picture of them. So I took a picture of them. And then one of them came up with Instagram put up on their phone, and they were like, is this you? And it was my Instagram profile. And I was like, yeah, that's me.
That's me.
And I guess they were all teachers at a deaf school. And they're
Oh,
like, oh my gosh, we show your videos to kids in our class all the time. And I
I
was
would
like,
just start
okay.
crying.
Yeah. And this
I
was
would like
like
that
when
would be
I
it for
first
me.
started. But after that, I was like, okay, this is why it's important, because even though I don't know, like, sometimes we get in our heads about numbers and reach, but I was like, it doesn't even matter, because somebody who needs it will find it if they need
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we are kind of getting out of like the clinical doctor controlled environment and more like the community and like
Mm.
using TikTok to Google things,
Right.
basically. You
Yeah,
know?
I love that part of our community because for the longest time, like as a physically disabled person, I always had a lot of other parts of my identity that I was kind of more focused on because my spine was its own issue. And that was the biggest issue. And so I was like, okay, let's fix that. So I always really identified with the term disabled. Got that down. But I never identified, like, I'm also low vision, and I never identified with that label either because I was like, I'm not blind enough to be low vision. I can't see out of one of my eyes, but I'm not blind enough to be low vision. I can't hear out of one of my ears, but I'm not deaf though. But I'm not. No, no, no. I'm not
Yeah.
hard of hearing. I just can't hear. And so if I take my hearing aid out, I just won't hear you. But I'm not deaf. And so I always kind of put those labels out of my mind because I was like, there are other things that I need to be more worried about and other things that are so physically apparent that those are the labels I identify with. But the ones you can't see, I don't identify with those labels. And so it
Yeah.
wasn't until TikTok and Chrissy really helped me. I followed Chrissy Marshall on TikTok before she followed me. And I was following her for years. And so I was obsessed with her content because she would point things out and she'd be like, do you do this? Well, that's because you're deaf. And I was like, whoa, that
Yeah.
blew my mind. And so then we became real life friends. And I was like, oh my gosh, like she just understood things and I didn't even have to explain them to her.
Yeah.
And she just got it. And so when we went to events together, we were helping each other, but like we didn't even have to like be like, oh, could you help me with this? We just knew what the other one needed, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and it
Yeah.
was beautiful. And I was like, this is what I was missing out on for all of like the 20 years of my life. And so then TikTok really, I think, really opened my eyes up to being like, well, why don't I identify with those labels? Like, there's no such thing as being blind enough or being deaf enough or whatever. Like, I just can't see and I can't hear. So, and once I was like you said, I also had a really, really rocky relationship with a few deaf people. Where at that event that we met at, actually, there was this woman that was like, oh, she doesn't sign. She's not deaf then. And I was like, Okay. And so it like really broke my heart because I was like, this is a community that's supposed to accept me, and 99% of people did at that event. But just that one deaf person being like, you're not enough for this community just shattered me. And so
Same,
that's
yeah.
when I have this complex of being like, you just told me I can't do something? Great. I'm going to do it harder. I'm going to become an expert at it, actually. And
Yeah.
Kaz was already has his seal of biliteracy from high school and was already fluent in ASL. So he started teaching me. And once we started living together, we had voice off days where like we would just sign. And was I good at it? No. Did I have to fingerspell a lot of things? Yes. We started going to deaf events where I would tell other deaf people about my horrible experience with that one deaf woman. And all of these people were like, that's horrible. That does not speak for the she does not speak for the whole community. Like, you're accepted here. It's okay if you're slow at signing. Like, we don't care. We just care that you're learning about the culture. We care about the fact that you're trying. Like, we don't care about the
Yeah.
fact that maybe it takes 10 minutes to have a 2-second conversation. It's okay. And so
Yeah.
that like really opened my eyes. But if it wasn't for TikTok, I don't, or like social media in general, where I was able to connect with other deaf and hard of hearing people, I don't think I would have ever accepted that part of myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, I think like learning to accept yourself, I think is an inner journey that you have to
Mm,
do. But then also taking the courage to step out and actually like immerse yourself in a community that you belong in and that you
mm,
fit in or that maybe you're curious about is where the real magic happens because there will always be those people that are like, oh my God, you're here. We've been waiting for more disabled people. And then there's always the people where it's like they're fourth generation disabled. They think you know nothing and they lack compassion because
yeah,
they want to keep their tradition
yeah,
and, certain energy the same. But, if you've ever been in a position in your life where you felt unwanted, you've taken up too much space, you haven't been accepted with open arms, it's easier to have compassion and to bring more people in because you know what it's like to be included. So there's always going to be people that I call them like elitists because I'm like, you guys
it's
think you
true.
own this
Yeah,
this community, but you don't. Like, it's all made up, and who even knows what disability looked like 500 years ago, you know? And so I just try to ignore some of those people that tell me I can't be something or that
yeah,
my lived experience isn't enough because it's made up anyway.
right.
Like that's all in their own head. And I don't need to absorb that energy
Mm.
and feel bad about myself. Like I already have so much self loathing. I don't need any more. Like I'm good. I don't need any more from
Yeah.
anybody else.
Well, and like as somebody who's
So,
born physically disabled too, I do admit that I have occasionally fallen down those rabbit holes of being like, what are you doing? Like you've been here for five
yeah.
minutes. Calm yourself down. But like I get really annoyed. This might be my internalized ableism. Honestly, I'm so up for saying that, and calling myself in. But I fully get really annoyed with people that became disabled later on in life
Yeah. Mhm.
and weren't born like I was, like disabled, because they, a lot of times I've noticed that they come into the community and try to monopolize is the wrong word, but like try
I know what
to,
you're saying.
yeah, they like
They
they try
try
to
to
come
make it
in.
their own thing and change it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or
And I
they're
think
like,
there's
no
room
one
for both.
understands me. And I'm like, girl, what are you talking about? I've been doing this since day one. You've been here for
Um,
less than a decade. Okay. Calm
yeah.
down. They're like,
Yeah.
no one understands. I'm in pain all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like I
Uh-huh.
get it. Like it's difficult and it is a really hard thing, but that's the thing that I get like that's the part where I have to find compassion within myself because I'm like being disabled is an isolating experience. Being disabled is an isolating experience just because I'm surrounded by the disability community now and a bunch of people who I know do understand and who do
Mm-hmm.
get it and who I can lean on when things get really difficult for me and I can vent to and whatever doesn't mean that everybody has that. And I
Yeah.
need to remind myself to be nice to them.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I do understand what you're saying. I think there's room for both. And I think
Yeah.
both experiences are valid because
Yeah.
we always have well, we've been putting in the work, we've been organizing, we've been trying to change the world. And now this other person wants to change the world, but like they're not acknowledging what we've created. I
Right.
totally get that. But then there's also the side where it's like, they clearly, when you're new, you just so bad want to be accepted and you feel like you finally have found your people. So you're like, please just show me mercy. Like, I've been looking for you
Yeah.
guys. So I
I'm
definitely
like,
think there's room for both.
I get it, but
Hmm.
also sit down.
Yeah. I mean, definitely.
We
And I
welcome
will,
you, but also stop.
yeah, and I
Hang
do,
on for a second. Watch. Listen.
yeah, and I think we talked about that this summer, you
Yeah.
know, and yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no perfect mix. Like, I do think Nick Novicki is one of the only people I have seen truly make every space he creates so accessible.
I
Like,
truly
and
don't know how he does that.
and it must take a village because even, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So, until you have your first blind friend or until you have someone that needs a ramp, sometimes you don't even realize what the layout of your house looks like because you haven't been on the lookout for those kind of access points. And then you go to so it takes a while to learn. And I think that's something I would always like to tell new people that DM me that are kind of scared to enter the party because they don't want to offend people. And I'm like, listen, you just need to show up and you'll
Yeah.
get it as you go
Yeah, and
because
sometimes
now
you will
I
make
know
mistakes, and that's okay.
exactly. And now I know, like, if somebody does something and I can't understand them, I am grown enough to say, hey, I need you to do it different because I can't hear you. Before I was too shy or, maybe meek or didn't want to bother someone. But now I'm like, no, I need help. So
Help
it's
me.
on me
Repeat
to,
it, please.
yeah. And so I just always want people to feel like they can show up even if they don't know anything.
Mm.
Because
And
there
I
are
want
plenty of
people to
people
know that,
doing
like,
that.
disabled people are, like, at least me personally, I'll just speak for myself. I'm so focused on my own disability and, like, accommodating for myself that sometimes I catch myself doing that too. I'm like, oh, shoot, I need to do. I need to rethink how I do this process because it's actually not accessible for everybody. Like
Mm-hmm.
last night, we have a perfect example of that. My neighbor, one of our neighbors who we're actually really good friends with, it's another couple. They live two doors down. They're amazing people. And she doesn't have a left hand. And we've been friends with them for, oh gosh, over a year. A year? About a year at this point. And they come over all the time. And, we hang out. We go on double dates. It's great. And last night we were like, oh, we should invite him over. We just got the Meta Quest, like the VR thing.
Mm.
I got it for Kaz for Christmas. And we were like, oh my gosh, we should bring them over so they can play that, so they can see. And about a day before they came over, I looked at Kaz and I was like, there are two controllers. Well, how is this going to work? She doesn't have a fully formed left hand. She can't hold the left controller. Okay. Is there? I was like,
Mm-hmm.
hang on. So we were trying to come up with like solutions. We were trying to look it up. Like, but that's such like a perfect example of me only focusing on my own disabilities. I do have two fully formed hands. And so I was like, oh, well, it's accessible for me. But then I didn't realize, like, oh, it might not be accessible for everybody else. you know?
Yeah.
Um,
So what
or
did you
even
do?
like,
Did you tell her beforehand?
yeah, we told her, we were like, hey, just so you know, there, you do need controllers. And she's like, oh, just tape it to my hand. And I was like, no, girl. I was like, I'm not about to tape something to like your wrist. Like, I'm not doing that. And she's like, why not? And I was like, what do you mean, why not? So we eventually figured it out. She just played with one. It was great. It was fine. It worked out in the end,
Hmm.
But she was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that either. And I was like, yeah. So eventually, I got it figured out. But it's things like that where it's like, I'm so focused on what's accessible for me that I don't even think about until I'm faced with a situation where something is accessible for me, but it might not be accessible for somebody else with a different disability. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think
Yeah.
that Nick Novicki does an incredible job. I truly do not know how he does it. Every single event I go to, he it just makes it, I mean, from my standpoint, pretty accessible for just about every single
Oh
disability.
yeah. It's so well thought out and so much care and love and time and attention. And he's so gracious, he's so good at having conversations with people and making sure people feel seen and heard. And I mean, he's just one of those people that's like a trailblazer, you
Yeah,
know? So, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so I just got this question on my last podcast episode with that just released this Sunday with my friend Jenna. Jenna's also in the arts. She's on Broadway currently, and she is a wheelchair user. And somebody commented and said that they are really interested. They're also in the arts, but they're not disabled. They don't identify as disabled. And so they were saying that they're really interested in the disabled experience in the arts, like as far as what kind of accommodations people use on and off stage, on and off screen. So I was going to ask you, because you're a director, so what kind of
Hmm.
accommodations do you use behind the camera that maybe not everybody uses, or do you use any?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. Oh, as soon as I meet somebody, I tell them who I am. I say, "Hi, I'm Elisa Richards. I'm the director for the day. Just so you know, I am hard of hearing. That means I wear hearing aids, and I also happen to be a lip reader. So I'm not rude. I'm just deaf. And if I can't
I'm
see
not
the
rude.
white
I'm
in
just
your
yeah.
eyes, yeah, I tell them if I cannot see the white in your eyes, I cannot hear you.
Can we make
Um,
that into a
and
shirt? Do you
yeah,
already
I
have
mean,
that?
I'm working on it, and I do have stickers that say that. If I can't
Okay,
see you, I can't hear you.
right.
Because
I'm not
I
rude.
do
I'm
think
just
people
deaf.
try to
I like.
talk to me. Yeah. But, like, people do try to talk to me. I think one of the reasons I was hesitant to going into production is because I used to work for Freeform, which I worked on the show Pretty Little Liars and, like,
Oh my gosh, really?
yeah,
I didn't know
I
that.
did that for a few years. Yeah, This Is Us. I did a lot. I worked for Freeform, Disney Studios, and Fox. So I was a
Whoa.
publicist for all those shows. And we would go to set, to see them try to like pull talent and interview them before like in between setups. And I would notice that like the director would be in Video Village, which is basically like in a dark corner with all these screens, and they would just be shouting across like three builds to the actors to give direction. And at
Oh,
that
that's
time I
not.
was like, I can't be an actor. Like I can't even hear what they're saying and I'm
I
saying
can't do
right
it.
next to them.
So.
I literally for years had that thought of like, how am I gonna work in
Mm.
this environment? How am I going to be able to take direction? How am I going to be able to give direction? I can't use, I don't know. I just was really kind of like bogged me down.
Mm.
But then I realized, no, you know what? I'm just going to have to start telling people I can't operate that way. Like, I'm going
Mm.
to have an assistant that stands right next to me that basically interprets or repeats back what the director is saying from 3 rooms away. So, anyway, when I go on set, I just tell everybody, even people I work with day to day, if I can't hear you, you're free to tap me on the shoulder. That's the best way to get my attention. You can wave in my face. I know that's like considered rude in American
I
culture,
prefer it
but like,
actually.
me too. But I just tell them like, you can get my attention by waving. Like, I need a visual context to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm like, come stand next to me and tell me what you want to say. And then you can go back to wherever you're at on set and kind of point and indicate what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I also use an app that live transcribes that I find really helpful. The one I've been using, unfortunately, has been in beta for like, I don't know, a year and a half. So I can never like share it, but it's the one that works best for me. But I think it's coming out soon.
Okay.
And so I just like occasionally reference my phone to see things I missed. But yeah, I mean, I just tell people that I am sorry, but I'm not sorry, but you're going to have to repeat that because like, and I can't have too many people talking to me at once.
No,
Like
that drives me
sometimes
nuts.
people, and because I think one of the biggest things I didn't realize as a director is that people are always going to ask you questions, like question after question after question.
Sure.
How's this lighting? Do you like how her hair looks? Do you like this background?
Right.
How's the sound? Like, and you're so overstimulated because you're trying to focus on the vision and the storytelling that, you know, you kind of hold your center and be like, that doesn't matter to me. I trust that you know how to light, so go
Right.
for it. That's
Just
why I
do
picked you. Yeah, do it.
If I don't
I'll
like
tell
it,
you if I
I'll
don't
tell
like
you.
it.
Yeah, just go. Do your job.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as an actor, though, it is really interesting because I do feel like when I audition or I have been on set, I do have to memorize a script fully. My scene, my sides, I have to know what the other person is going to say. Because recently I booked a job for a TV show and I had to go to Albuquerque to film it. This was in November, I think. And I think the episode comes out maybe in April. But when I was there, it was like a Vegas party scene. And there was like, you know, a lot going on. There's people gambling the slot machines. There's like 200 extras. And me and my scene partner were talking, and I literally couldn't hear a word she was saying. I couldn't lip read her because we're like walking side by side, and we're like drunk in the scene. So I was like, thank God I have memorized all my lines because I know what she says, and I can tell when she stops talking. Like there's a volume difference between when she's talking and not talking. But because I memorized what her line is, I'm going to say my line, which sometimes does feel inauthentic as an actor because I'm Meisner trained, so I'm used to like pinch and the ouch. But I just had to trust my instincts enough, and like as I am a hard of hearing person, I read body language.
Yeah,
so that kind of helped carry the scene. But I do think that is the one difference I've noticed as an actress, like auditioning in a very quiet environment with just me and the reader, and then being on set where it's noisy and there's machines and there's the big lights and the fans and, you know, a lot of people talking. And, you know, usually when the director is talking to you, they're kind of like walking and talking and showing you. And I'm like, okay, Alyssa, don't freak out. You know, like just trust your
Don't start crying.
instincts.
Just you know, you got it. You're fine.
Start laughing because if you don't laugh, you're going to cry.
Exactly. Just smile and nod.
Uh-huh. That's my go-to. And then I'm like, if I don't do what they say, they'll tell me a different way. You know, but yeah, I do think like me and my agent have had several conversations about like, because here's the tricky thing about having sort of an invisible disability is I so want to be able to break in to the industry in any way. And I almost feel like it's a superpower to be able to show up and not look disabled.
There you go.
And then people find out, oh, did you know that, you know, the lead also is hard of hearing? And then through me be like, oh my gosh, look at this whole community that's like living a normal life.
Yeah.
You know? And so I do think like sometimes I'm tempted not to tell production.
Not to say it, yeah.
Because I'm like, just like, because as soon as you tell them any type of difference you have, it's not that I think they're just, people are scared of things they don't understand. So I think they just go, well, what if she can't hear? And then we spend 2 hours filming this scene that should take 20 minutes. And you're like, bro, just trust me. Like,
I'm good at my job. I know what I'm doing.
Yes. And like, we're trained. We're not beginners, you know, like, and so I do think that has been like a hurdle where I'm like, you know what? We don't really know the answer, but on all my acting websites, it's very clear that I'm hard of hearing. I've only ever had one production kind of ask me what accommodations I need
Mm.
which I think is probably because it was a deaf role as opposed to non-deaf.
Yeah.
But, I do think that's an interesting thing about it being invisible.
Mm.
It's a blessing and a curse because you're like,
Right.
oh, it's a blessing because you can blend and you can get into places that maybe without bias, but
Mm.
then as soon as you inform them, unfortunately the bias still exists. And you're
Yeah.
like, no, it's the same. Like,
Go
I haven't
back.
changed. Go back. But yeah. And then it's like they have absurd questions.
Yeah.
They're like, but can you
Always.
guys like can you like have sex with someone? And you're like, yep, still the same.
Still the same. Actually, my ears just don't work. Actually.
Yeah.
It's
And I also
exact
think
same.
it's very disorienting because I always assume like, oh, if you can talk, you can hear. And it's like, no,
Not the way it
that's
works.
called speech therapy. You know what I mean? That's like years of learning how to move your mouth and just like habit,
Yeah.
practice and a muscle, really.
That's the main
So,
thing. That's the main comment I get is, well, if you're deaf, why don't you sound deaf? I'm like, I don't know. It's just the
yeah,
way it works. Sorry.
yeah. And also, that's another thing I had to overcome is, some people in like high school would kind of say I had a funny accent, maybe because I wasn't as good as like enunciating then. Obviously, acting classes helped me, learn how to enunciate because my teachers were ruthless and they'd be like, Alyssa, we can't understand you. And I'd be like, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I can't understand you. Welcome to my world.
Yeah. So, but, I do think in post acting better speech classes, I did feel like, well, I also no longer maybe have as a pronounced deaf accent. And so I was like, oh, this again, that was me putting myself into a box.
Sure.
And, and not accepting that, hey, if I live this way, it's likely that other people live this way. So
Yeah.
why are we beating ourselves up to be something that is not maybe authentic to us anymore?
And it's literally just made up. I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah. So, anyway, those are kind of the accommodations I usually ask for, and I just kind of roll with the punches. But I really do think the best thing I do for myself is I just tell people up front what I need because it makes it less confusing, and I can
Yeah.
tell sometimes they're overwhelmed with information like, whoa, you're hard of hearing, and what's a hearing aid? But you're pretty young. Like, you can see the intrusive thoughts coming in. But then I'm like, okay, moving on. Next. So, like,
Anyways, so do your job.
yeah. But I will say this summer I worked with Chelsea Hill and the Rolettes, and we made a 9-episode docuseries about Chelsea and her team, specifically Bria, her COO of the Rolettes, and Connor, about their planning the Rolettes experience and how they pull that off as like a CEO mom, and just like how they put together the manpower for 3 people to do that. And, I think that we always learn from different environments we're in. And, obviously some of them, they knew I was hard of hearing, but like they didn't know that I used certain apps for phone calls. They didn't know that I used captions. They occasionally still send me voice memos. So it's one of those things where it's like, you kind of just, you just have to be so like, whatever. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of like a partnership. Like, we're all on the same team. We're all on the same side. We all want access. And it just takes, repetition and all that stuff. So, and even like, my DP or my sound girl, like, even though I've worked with them multiple times, you always have to be like gently advocating for yourself. Just because it's probably not normal.
Can't hear. Still can't. My ears actually didn't fix themselves overnight.
Yeah. So, and again, like, unfortunately, sometimes I think that does lead me to hiring people that are lower voices because, like, I've tried to make girlfriends who are really soft-spoken and very, like, timid and pleasant. And
And I'm
you
like,
know, I will
what?
adjust. Yeah, I will adjust all the settings on my hearing aids. I would literally like try to turn up the bass, the
The
treble. Like I'll
app,
do
you're like,
anything,
hello,
and then I
please.
still can't hear them. And I'm like, you know what? Unfortunately, I just don't think we're gonna be friends. Like, we can be friendly, but like, I don't know that I'm ever gonna feel like I can communicate with you. So I do think also I kind of tend to hire people that I know are can have accessible tools
Mm,
and also um, people that I can hear. You know,
fair.
so
Yeah. I feel like that's a basic thing that not a lot of people would think about. Like, I've definitely had people, like, met people where I'm like, man, they have a really great personality, but we're never going to hang out because I can't hear them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah,
never
yeah.
really thought about that thought process until right now. I just had like four people come to mind, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. Actually, I've definitely stopped talking to people because I just can't hear them.
Yeah, and I, you know, like one of those girls is my old roommate's best friend, and my old roommate is also diabetic. So she taught
Mm.
me a lot about disability, and she introduced me to the Access Pass, which is a free disability pass you get to the national parks. And, you know, she taught me a lot about diabetes that I hadn't known, but we've been friends for years.
Yeah.
But living with somebody that's diabetic is totally different than being friends with someone who has diabetes. And but anyway, her best friend is one of those really soft-spoken girls. And I just told her, I was like, "Hey, I just want you to know I don't dislike your friend. I like her. I think she's so sweet. I can tell just energetic, but I just can't hear her. And and we all try to watch a movie and talk, I get frustrated because I don't want to have to say what 19
Yeah.
times. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'd rather just like go in my room and hang out by myself. And I think that's okay. And I don't
Yeah.
want her to take it personally because she shouldn't have to change her
Right.
octave because I don't even know if she can. So I'm just going to go to my room, retreat, and do my own thing. And it has nothing to do with her personally. It's just that I can't hear her. And
Right.
that means that maybe we may not be the best of friends.
Yeah.
So,
My favorite
yeah.
thing is when I meet someone new and they'll be like, or they'll call my name and I don't respond or whatever, and then they're like, like I called you over there, and I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm deaf, and I'll say that because it's a fact, and they'll look at the like, and I'm like, no, no, I'm so serious, I'm actually deaf. People think I'm kidding,
Yeah,
and
they
then I'm
always
like,
think that.
hello,
Yeah,
I
they
have the
always
hearing
think
aid
that.
in. I'm all
Yeah.
like, it's not a figure of speech, guys. I'm really, I really can't hear. And so my favorite is when Kaz has to correct people, and other people will try to get my attention, and then he's like, "She literally can't hear you. She's not. It's not gonna work.
Yeah, yeah. And
She
I
can't
mean,
hear." Yeah.
yeah, I agree with your lived experiences of people always assuming that I was kind of dumb and aloof and lived in my own world, and I did. That's what I
And
did. I
I
was
did because I
living in
couldn't
my
hear.
silent bubble. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. And I always thought it was, people would always be surprised when I gave like a speech in class or, you know, did like some kind of presentation. And it was coherent and smart and well thought out, and people would be like, "Oh wow, like
She
she's
does have
not
things to say.
expressive." Yeah, she's not expressive when I talk to her, but like she's got a point of view. I'm like, "Yeah, bitch, I do."
Weird, strange.
Yeah, strange how that works.
I was the opposite, so I was just really loud.
Hmm.
Mainly
See,
because
I went through
I'm
that
just that
phase.
way.
Yeah.
But also because I couldn't hear 90% of the time. So I was just, people were like, she's not deaf, she's just loud.
Uh
And then people
huh.
were like,
Yeah.
oh, that actually does make sense now. She can't hear. So, like in restaurants, I always have a really hard time trying to judge the volume I should speak at because I don't know. It's just loud. I don't I can't tell you what volume people are talking around me. It's just a jumble of noise and it's loud. So sorry
No, my
if I'm
partner
too
always
loud.
has to be like, yeah, my partner always has to be like, hey, just so you know, like You're
You're
kind of
really loud.
screaming right now. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Sorry,
And don't get me
sorry.
wrong, sometimes it does hurt my feelings only because I get a flashback to, I was a cheerleader obviously because that's things I could hear. We were yelling and hooting
Oh
and
my gosh, I was
hollering.
also a
So
cheerleader.
like but you get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're like, rah,
No, that
rah,
does make a
yeah,
lot of
like
sense.
and it's a way
It
to
does.
express yourself it's easy to follow. You're just counting or you have memorized cheers. But I do remember people always telling me, like I was always very loud. And then people would be like, Alyssa, you're so loud, like you're so annoying. And I'd be like, oh, shit, like I need to be quieter. And so
That's
then I
so
had the
sad.
reverse effect to where I kind of like withdrew because I didn't know where my voice was landing. And like I remember one time I was in like a Wednesday church service or something in like 8th grade. And my biggest fear, I hate when we do like prayers anywhere because I
Mhm.
don't know when it begins and when it ends. You know what I mean? Like I'm just always like kind of looking like around, like are we praying right now? It's the same thing in yoga. You're like, what are we doing?
What are we
What's
doing? Oh,
happening?
okay. Got it.
Yeah, but I remember I don't know, we got divided up into groups into like 4 or 5, and everybody had to at one point pray. But it's kind of like reading aloud in class. You're like, I don't know when it's my turn, and I definitely don't know where we're at in the textbook because I can't hear where we're at. So I remember, people, I guess, were praying, and I thought it was totally silent. Like, so I started talking aloud, praying, and I guess afterwards I found out that I'd actually talked over people while they were trying to pray. And I was like, you know what? I just can't. Like, any of those
Sorry.
environments, it's not for me. And I don't know, I have to find a different way to participate in things like that if I ever want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, at my age now, I kind of just laugh at it because I'm like, oh my god, that's ridiculous, and I can't believe that people didn't say anything
Yeah, why didn't nobody tell you in the moment?
or like touch me or even say, hey, this is clearly not working for Alyssa. But again, I think most people are just living in their own world, trying to survive, trying to fight their own demons, that they're just like, whatever.
It's fine.
Uh-huh.
She'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually have a question for you. um So a couple months ago, my friend was having a party, and she wanted to invite one of our friends that um, uses a wheelchair. And she was like, "Hey, my space isn't accessible. It has stairs. It's an old building. There's no elevator. Do you think I should still invite her?" And I said, this is what my advice was. So I kind of just want to hear what your take on this is because,
Mhm.
again, we're all learning. But I basically said, hey, I totally think you should invite her. And I think you should also be really transparent and just say, hey, we're having this pregame at my house. Unfortunately, the only access is through like 15 stairs and there's no elevator. But where we're going after the pregame for the actual hangout is accessible at this bar.
Mhm.
So, obviously we'd love for you to come, but we just want you to know, like, we're happy to accommodate you, but you may not be comfortable with us, like, picking you up. Whatever, you just never know.
Yeah.
So I told her that that's what she should do. I was like, you should at least invite her, but just be honest that, like, because she was newer to our friend
Mhm.
group. So, and people have been in apartments for 10 years.
Sure.
So it's not like, they meet one person, they're probably going to move,
Right.
especially if they only see that person at a pregame. So I kind of just want to know, like, what your take would be on a situation like that.
Yeah. So I've actually been in this situation
I
before.
imagine, yeah.
And it's happened a lot to me actually. And especially in college where like that did happen. Like I'm having flashbacks to this one specific thing where we had like a cohort of like 15-ish people. And this girl in our cohort invited all of us in the group chat to her party at her apartment. And she was like, "Hey, would love for all of you to come. Like it's a Halloween party, whatever, whatever." And she texted me privately and was like, hey, I do want you to come. You are absolutely invited. Just want you to know that my apartment does have a flight of stairs and no elevator to get up. So, whatever you need from me, and if you feel comfortable with somebody else, that is totally okay. But like, just wanted you to know we are happy to accommodate you, whatever. And I really appreciated that because I was like, oh, so they're not leaving me out on purpose. But I did end up going because she'd warned me ahead of time. I could plan ahead, I could ask for help, and it ended up being fine. Like,
Yeah.
because she let me know like a week in advance. So I totally agree with that. I think as long as, I mean, those of us who are physically disabled, we know that the world's just not built for us. So we're kind of already prepped to like face a flight of stairs
Yeah.
or whatever. And so I feel like that is the complete right thing. Just invite her, prep her ahead of time, and if she still wants to come, like, we know how to ask for help,
Yeah.
most of the time.
But I guess, like,
Or,
even,
no,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to say, like, I guess even, she was worried because the door to the bathroom was really slim,
Mm,
Like, I don't know if it was 3 feet because, again, I think her apartment was built in like 1905.
sure.
So, and I was like, I think that's just a question you have to just tell her. You just have to tell her all the information you know. And I was like, you could even send a video. Like, this is
Yeah.
what it looks like. It may be a little daunting, And because, again, the reason I ask is also another friend of mine who is blind. He was talking about having a Christmas party in LA. Because he was like, the disabled community is so great. But he was
Hmm.
like, but I have 2 steps up to my apartment. And, I don't know if my bathroom's accessible. And I could just tell the guilt was heavy on him because he so wanted to gather people, but he was
Yeah.
like, it's not perfect. Like Nick Novicki would make it perfect because he would probably rent a space, But for people
Nick
that
Novicki would be
aren't,
like, I built a ramp with my bare hands.
yes,
Welcome in.
I know, welcome. Yeah, so, I was like, hey, again, I think you have to do the best with what you can. And
Yeah.
if we have to put, a makeshift ramp down, but I think you just have to be honest with everybody that's coming and just say, here's a video of it. Because I think that's the best way to prepare people mentally
Yeah.
and to know.
Also, when people text me things like that, I'm automatically like, so, like, it warms my heart so much because I'm like, you thought of me during this process, like,
Yeah.
even though it's inaccessible and even though I probably won't go, it's okay because like you thought in advance and like you want me there, you want to include me, and you want me there, and you were thinking ahead of the things of my needs. You were thinking ahead about things that I might need to be able to come and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So I automatically am just kind of like, oh, they like me. They really like me,
Yeah, 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 yeah. And
So
that's what
yeah,
I
I
try to
totally
explain
agree.
to people, but
Yeah.
yeah. Because I will say, like, my partner is also an actor, and I think he had 3 movies come out this year. So we got to go to 3 different screenings.
That's
And
wild.
we would email them ahead of time, like, hey, I'm RSVPing with my +1 who's hard of hearing. And every time we went to the venue never had open captions or closed captions. Like, you couldn't
Of
even get
course
a
not.
caption view. And it's interesting that they don't even have that ready because the movie comes out in like 2 days, So you're like, anyway, so we have always opted out. We've never seen any of his movies until they come out on like Disney Plus or HBO or
Yeah.
Netflix because we wait until we can watch the captions.
Yeah.
And he wants to do that because he's like, this is how I participate in changing the world is by showing up, asking, like being like, hey, did you guys end up getting captions? No. Okay, well then I'm leaving.
Sorry.
Yeah. So it is one of those things where, and I'm always like, babe, it's fine. Like, this is your moment. If
Yeah.
you want to stay, like, I'm happy to stay and you can tell me what it's about at the end of the movie, you know?
I'll just try my
But
best to lip read the whole time.
Even though it's so cinematic and we never see anybody's faces. But, that's a stance that he has taken.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm here for it. I'll live for it. But
Yeah.
again, you know, any space you go to, like, I got to meet, I think his name was Matt, but he was a Paralympic basketball
He
player.
just started following me on Instagram yesterday.
Oh, really? No, he's so
Yes.
cool. He's so cool. And actually, I met him, so I knew him kind of through Chelsea because we filmed an episode where the Rolettes tried wheelchair basketball, but they didn't have basketball chairs. They had rugby chairs. And we tried to get Matt to come on the episode to teach the girls how to play, but we had a conflicting schedule. And anyway, this fall, I went to a hard of hearing trip where basically, in a caption,
That
this
looks
app
so
that-
cool.
I know, it literally was so cool. And I gotta say, it was probably my favorite, like, deaf gathering I've been to. Because it was
That's
a
my
mix of, like,
favorite
hard of
thing.
hearing
I saw it,
and
and
deaf.
I'm gonna tell you, I did have a little FOMO.
No, it was so fun. We were all just waving at each other's faces. And, some people are like, we only lip read, and some people are like putting their ears up. Like, we all just had such different accommodations, and we all just like got it. And we were all like, okay, we need a listening break. Like, no more
love
talking,
that.
no more signing.
talking. Everybody shut up.
Yeah, so that was really cool. But anyway, when I was at the hotel, I was in the lobby, and I saw Matt just wheel in. And I literally went up to him, and I was like, yo, I know who you are. I was like, hey, Matt, I'm Elisa. How's it going? I told him I knew Chelsea and what I had done with Chelsea, like the docu-series. And he started following me, and then he started meeting all these deaf people, right? Because all of us started trickling in. And so all of us were kind of giving him a hard time, like, yo, do you caption your content? Like, what are you doing over there? And he was like, I'm going to now. And so, but he was so cool, and he was like, jacked. But he talked about something recently online that I really have thought of but never like articulated, was that unfortunately you have to demand access, but you also have to have adaptability. And you have to be willing, because again, like you said, the world wasn't built for us. And it may take a while to transform the entire world, even just the U.S.
Yeah.
And, that you have to learn how to be adaptable, and adaptability is a mindset. And I was like, yeah, I mean, sometimes you just have to be willing to give up what you would like just to be in the room to maybe initiate change, even if it's not like 100% there yet,
Yeah.
Because I get so comfortable going to disabled events because I know I'm going to be accommodated, and I know that the whole Nick Novicki has got us.
If Nick's going, I'm going.
Yeah,
If Nick's
that's the basic
inviting me
rule.
to this, I'm going.
Exactly. But then you get snapped back into reality when you go to other events, and it's not hosted by Nick Novicki.
You
And
see,
you're like,
where's Nick? Where'd he go?
You're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to start asking for things. And,
Fine.
you just have to be adaptable again. So, I mean, even like your experience with the Rolettes experience, like I know personally that all those little floor mats they put down to make it easier was expensive.
Yeah.
And I also know that they were like, okay, next year, because the carpet is hard to push with your wheels,
So hard.
And people are already doing it on their hallway floor, and then
Yeah.
they're coming down and they're having to do it even more.
Yeah.
And,
For hours.
all day. All
All
day,
day.
every day, for 4 days. Like,
Yeah.
But I also know, like,
I was jacked leaving that though.
I
was
mean,
like,
yeah.
My arms
Yeah.
feel great.
I mean, you know that those girls put their heart and their soul and their finances into making it what they could, and but it's little things like that where sometimes like you don't know what kind of accommodations you need until you get into a space, and they're like, oh, this would have been really helpful.
Yeah.
Or so I think having the adaptive mindset is a survival technique, really.
Yeah,
So
I agree. Okay, this brings me into my last question. for you,
Okay, cool.
which is my main demographic online in for my content is young people. So mainly like 13 to 18. Some
Okay,
of them
cool.
are my age, but mainly like young teenagers.
Mhm.
And I get comments all the time from young disabled people
Mhm.
asking me how to have confidence in your body, how to love your body, how to um, accommodate, how to ask for accommodations, how to advocate for yourself, all of the above. So my question is, what would your advice or what would you tell young disabled people right now?
I mean, I would tell young disabled people that they are the experts of their own lives. And when I was young, I often looked to other people for answers, and
Mm,
I often only mimicked what I saw. If I didn't see anybody advocating, I would think it's not okay to advocate. But now I realize, looking back, that the adults actually don't know anything, and that you are an expert of your story, your needs. If you
mm,
feel like you have an inkling that something may help you, or that a technique may give you more access, it's worth asking,
mm,
because you actually have so much of the power within you to ask and to initiate the change in your environment. And if
mhm,
you can't do it for yourself, think of the people behind you that may also need the same thing.
mhm,
Because if you're too scared to do it for yourself, you can be like, well, I know a seventh grader who might need this by the time they get to high school. So let me do it for them, you know? And I think realizing that adults actually don't know that much, and a lot of, you're the expert.
yeah,
And usually you're the first person they meet that needs access. So you have to be the one to set the tone.
right,
And that requires a lot of courage. But it's so necessary. And once you do it, it'll feel so good. You just have to get over that fear of
yeah,
asking and taking up space.
right,
Um, and just know that, like, you're the only one that can tell them what you need.
mm,
And that's a strong, like, skill set. I mean, I even learned that in adulthood working in a corporate job.
yeah,
I mean, not even having to do with my hearing loss, but just being
yeah,
comfortable enough to saying, I don't know what that means. You want me
mm,
to make this? What does that mean?
mm.
Or like, how does a fax machine work? Because they know, because they're like 50, right? But you're like, I didn't grow up with fax
You're
machines,
like, what do I do with this?
Yeah, and I think it's okay. Like, I had to be okay with looking uh, unknowledgeable or like dumb, being like
Mm,
the young dumb one that would be like, how does a fax machine work?
sure.
But once they teach me, I'm good, baby. Like, you don't
I'm
need to
good for
teach
the
me
rest of my
again.
life. Actually, now I know how a
Exactly.
fax machine works.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with accommodations. Like, each time you ask for access, it gets easier.
Mm,
Like, it takes little steps. Like,
right.
at first you may be timid, and then, or honestly, do it with your favorite teacher, whoever you feel most comfortable with. And then you can save the access for asking your scary football coach history teacher, who's a little maybe more gruff.
Yeah.
And,
And
you
you might be
know,
surprised too. That's what I've
yeah.
learned is like asking the scary football health teacher is sometimes like that is the person that is going to not only accommodate for you but help you advocate for yourself for the rest of your time in high school or help you advocate for yourself for the rest of your life. Like I had one teacher in third grade. She was terrifying. And in the moment, I hated her. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. I was in tears every single day coming home from third grade. But she taught me how to advocate for myself. And she's a family friend now. And she like came to my sister's graduation party last year. And like I sent her those little like family updates things that
Yeah.
happen in our lives because she she's now a part of my life and I know that I can go to her with any situation and be like, how do I advocate for myself in this situation? What am I supposed to do? And she will help me. And it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't terrified of her as an 8-year-old, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So like
yeah.
sometimes the scariest people that you are most worried about advocating for yourself to, will be the best people that you advocate for yourself to. And
Yeah.
sometimes they won't, but sometimes they will.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that if you try advocating for yourself and it falls flat, that is part of the process. That's normal. There's nothing you did wrong. You just have to try again and try it with somebody else.
Right.
Because like it was easy for me to do it once, feel really scared, overwhelmed with the rejection, and then not do it again.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you're going to have to do this your whole life. So the sooner you start doing it, you're going to be a rock star by the time you hit 25 or
It's
20.
true.
Like now I feel great about it. But when I
Yeah.
was 12, I was absolutely terrified. And unfortunately, if you're going to have to do it your whole life, you might as well get good at it now.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
yeah. So,
Alyssa, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
of course, I freaking love you, Cassidy, and thank you for
I love
making space for
you.
me, and thank you for having me on the Gab. We need to see each other in real life soon.
Yes, we
You
do. We
know.
need to hang out. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Elisa.Richards. My mother did me dirty. My name is spelled Elisa, even though it's pronounced Alyssa, like
Alyssa.
Alyssa. So, we're here for the curveballs. But yeah,
So thanks, Mom.
Instagram, TikTok. Yeah, exactly. That's what I tell my mother.
Dog.
Thanks, Mom.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening to The View from 4 Feet and 3 Inches. I'm your host, Cassidy Huff. Please make sure to go follow me on all my other platforms, as well as like, comment, give a 5-star rating, depending on where you're watching or listening. I post every single day on TikTok for as long as it's here, Instagram and Facebook Reels, as well as YouTube Shorts. And I post a YouTube vlog every Wednesday and a podcast episode every Sunday. Thank you so much. Oh, I also have a Patreon. Please, God, go follow me on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.